I'm gonna start because my last name starts with A. Is that all right, you two? Just by chance, I'm gonna say Grums and Janelle and I met a little while ago to plan and talk about what we're thinking of doing and planning to do at the workshops this weekend for generating momentum, and then to talk about this Unpanel. And I want to do a shout out to um, where I learned of it, which I learned of it from Charles Smith, Tori and Kefarata, to people who were organizing Radical Acts and Unconference. It was a theater unconference that happened in November. That was supported by the Saskatchewan Association of Theatre Professionals, and I got to join in on that. And that's that idea of an unpanel. That's where I first heard that term and offered it to Tatenda and this group to say, how do we shake it up a bit, especially after 2 years and 2 years plus being a lot of Zooms and online. I'm just, I kind of wish my mind and my life could have a refresh button sometimes, just like on the computer, just to refresh it. So that was one offer of why we're calling it an unpanel, if any of you are wondering. Also, because this is generating momentum, which is about a youthful spirit and intention of activism and social impact and change. And so let's turn it upside down for a moment and try something else. That's something I wanted to just give a shout out for. I'm always thankful for exchanging of knowledge with different theater makers, art makers, and activists and community people that I get to meet. So when we met and planned this unpanel, we kind of came to a consensus that, and for any of you in the room who like to know how this will work, hi Augustine. Prime Org. I don't think I've ever heard of that foundation, actually. I'm going to look that up after the meeting because I don't. I'm just realizing I don't know that organization.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome. The way this unpanel will be, Grums and Janelle and I have this general agreement that we'll start with locating ourselves, which we kind of already slowly did, like where we're coming from. We have made or have offered to Tatenda, our wizard behind the curtain, some videos, a 1 minute video each, 1 minute-ish, as a way to introduce us in a, I don't know, again, refreshing kind of way, instead of just, or doing it live. Yes, thanks, Janelle. Instead of just reading a bio or having Tatenda read a bio. Again, in the spirit of an unpanel and generating momentum, just reimagining and redreaming up how we can connect online. So that'll happen first, folks, us locating where we're coming from. And we'll ask any of you to please, in the chat box, add in any feelings of where you're coming from today at this moment. Also, in this lonely world online, when we don't see everyone's faces, and that is up to you, I encourage you to turn on your video even for parts of this conversation as if we were in the room together. And I challenge that, because if we were in the room together, basically, you wouldn't have a paper bag over your head. You would actually be in the room. If I can be so bold as to put it that way. And I say that very respectfully, because I know some of you may be either in a place that you can't turn it on, or you don't have that on your device, the ability to. So please know that comes with a lot of respect, being that bold to say that. We're also going to share some images that we shared that inspire our relationship to the land and to service, kind of just touching again on our practices in our lives. And then we also thought up 2 questions. One question that we wanted to give each other, because often artists don't get time to just sit and ask, how I have this question I'm just curious to ask you about. So that will happen later on in this hour. And we have a second question. We were going to have one question for our colleagues on this unpanel, and one question that I'm calling in the dark or out into this space that any of you are more than welcome to answer. So that will happen halfway through the time. This is starting now, and we expect we'll be done around 7:30 so that there's time for other in conversation or questions. But please know, if you have a question in the moment, don't feel like you have to wait till after 7:30. Please throw them into the chat. Or I'm going to use my reactions to show you, a hand or a thumb up can let us know, a raised hand can let us know that thanks drums, that you might want to talk if you put the hand up. But also these lovely emojis that the UnPanel team is bringing up is a nice way, if you aren't going to come on video, to just share a little warmth and connection in here, because it does feel lonely when we're talking, just to make sure that we know we're not in the void. If you're on camera and you feel something resonate that Janelle says or Grum says, I use sparkle fingers, but you can always use any kind of gesture, even a nod, Good. Okay, I'm just activating the space and giving you the soup du jour so you know how this will happen. And the invitation is wide in terms of your engagement in your speaking or writing in the chat box. It's a wide open door on that. Okay, Janelle, Grums, can one of you start us off with locating a bit more of where you're coming from? Again, it's a big wide door, that question. You can answer it how you wish to answer it in this moment.
Well, I don't mind starting, and I'm going to do my best. So hello, everybody in the Zoom room. Hello over there. Hello over there. Down and then above. I don't know if I see everybody, but hello. It's always fun to play Brady Bunch, and if that doesn't make sense, that's okay. It's worth a Google. Welcome, everybody. My name is Janelle Piopskonius. I am a geriatric millennial who lives on Little Pine First Nation, and that's where I'm coming from today. So if things get a little bit loud, things get a little bit, glitchy, that's because of the internet, or that's because of the nature of my home life. I now have welcomed a 2-year-old into my home, and we are having a lovely time, trying to navigate all the new spaces of being a new parent and things. So things are being interesting. And so what else can I tell you? I'm from a First Nations community. I'm a university graduate, first generation on my immediate family, which is quite the privilege and also the weight. So I'm a status First Nations person. So my relationship to Canada, the government, Saskatchewan, etc., is really unique. And what else can I say about? I'm able-bodied. I am also cis presenting, although I use she, they pronouns interchangeably. Some days I'm more feminine and some days I'm not. I'm also on the autism spectrum, so I'm not fully in any world. So I have a unique sense of self. And in terms of marginality and in poverty, I'd say I'm in that poverty range, only because of student loans and just the nature of access to work where I'm from. And there's lots more that I could probably unpack, but that's what I would like to locate with myself today. Thank you.
I can go next. I'm Grums. I use they, them pronouns. I forgive me if I look down because I made notes for today because I'm so freaking nervous. And I just want to put that out there. I'm so nervous about these things. This whole UnPanel and the whole even being asked to be a mentor. I was like, me? What? I'm queer. I'm trans. I like to use the word trans to describe myself and not non-binary because I think non-binary comes with a lot of baggage and expectations. That phrase itself, not that anyone who is non-binary or uses those words comes with baggage, but I think oftentimes the sort of cis white supremacy likes to put non-binary into this third gender box and this expectation of androgyny. And so I prefer the chaos that is just the umbrella of trans. So that's how I like to describe my gender. I also present as a white woman, which is both a double-edged sword. So while I have the privilege and the safety of presenting that way, it also hurts when I'm perceived that way. And so I'm also working to recognize moments when I weaponize that safety and privilege of presenting as a white woman. My ancestors come from Scotland and Ukraine, though I know very, 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 very little about my history and my familial history, and that's because my ancestors gave that up in the lure of white supremacy and the lure of becoming a quote unquote Canadian. And so that is something that I I'm long for, is that sort of where we came from. The furthest back I know is sort of my grandparents. I am born on Treaty 6 in Saskatoon, though I have moved around a lot in the past 5 years. I have had series of sort of housing instability, as well as I've had the privilege to be able to tour my work around. And so it's a lot of like, well, I can't afford rent, but I can, let's take this show on the road and sleep on some couches. So that's been a lot of my experience in the past 5 years, is not really having a home base. Including right now. I come to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico, in my partner's uncle's house. We had gigs canceled because of Omicron, and so our tour got canceled, and we went, oh, we have nowhere to stay anymore. So if you notice all of the national parks memorabilia around, this is his place. And if my internet is spotty as well, I apologize. Yeah, so I'm on land that I've never been to before. It's Pueblo land, and Santa Fe has really interesting history here, where it was colonized by Spanish conquistadors, and then the town was actually retaken back by Pueblo people, and then it was recolonized by America. So it's a really interesting history to learn that coming here. And I find it really interesting to learn that in different places that I go. I am also a theater rat, so I come from that background. And so I bring that into it as well, and I like to make my own stuff. Yeah, I think that's everything. Cool. Thank you for having me.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Thank you, you two. I'm Chris. I use she, her pronouns. I grew up here in the city that is called Regina, Pile of Bones on Treaty 4. I live on Toronto Street. The first city I came to when I was little with my parents from the Philippines was Toronto. So I like that kind of circle. I come from I like to say, a long line of badass matriarchs from the Philippines on different islands of Cebu and Mindanao. I have in my heart ancestry that is both indigenous and colonizer from the Philippines. And I find that always very interesting. And I like the task of taking a look at that through the work that I do in theater. I try to make theater that feels like a place that I can belong in, a stage where I think I belong, so that hopefully other people who don't see themselves on stage feel they can belong on the same stage I share. I try to make theater right now that reminds people that Filipinos aren't all one kind. Indigenous people aren't all one kind. There are so many kinds of us, like there are as many islands in the Philippines. And that's the case for nations here too. And for other people who come from other countries. I struggle with the words newcomer. I'm struggling with social media right now. This is how I'm locating myself. I just finished a 3-hour workshop today next door to my house, where a dance school happens to be Fada Dance Contemporary Dance School, owned by my old good friend Misty Wenzel. I get to dance there. My daughters dance there, my husband does, and I also teach little kids there. And today I hosted about 15 senior citizens who are from India and Pakistan. The group is part of the Regina Immigrant Women's Center, a senior citizen programming they do called New Stars. I've been invited to work with the group, the New Stars, to create a theater project that brings up the themes that of struggles for older immigrants, and challenges, but also the joys, what some of their happiness is. So so literally a couple hours ago, I was next door with these lovely senior citizens, Bhangra dancing, eating some food, and sharing stories while we wore our masks and while we just tried to stay distant. And so that's the other thing I want to bring up for locating myself. I'm at a place where I am understanding that the pandemic isn't going anywhere so quickly, and that it's as complex as life is. And so that means for me as a maker and a person who does like to push an envelope, I'm not prepared to simply always go online anymore. I'm at that point in the pandemic where I'm like, well, actually, live art is very important. Live connecting, live community and relationship making and building. So I'm in that place where I'm like, well, what of that? How do we do that now again? How do we all start stepping into the rooms a bit more? How do we challenge the funders that, it's going to actually take a little more time and money to figure this all out, especially for people who don't have access as easy to devices, Wi-Fi and such. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm noticing that. Tatenda, did you ask something? I'm curious why you struggle with the word newcomer. I guess because I have a few friends who are called that and have been here for at least close to a decade. But when it comes to granting identity placement in the world of like how to access things, they're put into this term, which is interesting when they have this. I have a few friends who come from somewhere else and have an expansive experience and profile of working somewhere else. And so it feels weird that they're called newcomer. I don't know. Something about me, and that's just me. I'm I guess more comfortable as being called an immigrant kid because that's what I grew up with. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So there we are, locating ourselves. I was hoping that if any of you else in the room feel compelled to share, as we've just shown you many different ways to locate yourself, whether that's by ancestry, emotional state, identity, class, feel free. And you can just put it in the chat. We'll keep going along. But if you want to speak out loud and share where you're coming from, by all means, as I mentioned, please feel free to put up the hand or just unmute and say, excuse me, I'd love to share. And Grums and Janelle, I'll ask you, go ahead and unmute if you want, and we can continue on. What's the next thing we were going to do?
Are we doing the videos?
Tatenda, our wizard behind the curtain.
Okay, let's see if I can actually get this right. 2 years later. Can everybody see that?
Oh, it's me first.
Sorry, Grums. Okay. I'm gonna need to know if people can hear this.
Okay, so I've spent probably the last...
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
about 50 hours in the past 2 months on the road, driving around rural, small town, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, United States. I'm really lucky to travel like this much and drive around, but we stop in a lot of small town gas stations, and every time I go in, I'm always like a little bit worried that I'm not presenting enough of a certain way to use the bathroom that I go into, and that somebody's gonna say something, or I'm gonna get in trouble or yelled at, and be in a place of real danger. And I think about this a lot when we go into these places, and I know that it's like not about bathrooms, but it's also always about bathrooms, because it's always about safety and what's acceptable, and I'm constantly having to like think about how I present and how I look on a certain day, and the mullet definitely gives me away now.
Okay. Am I showing, oh, am I showing the rest?
Janelle's gonna do one live.
Okay.
Would you like me to go next? Okay, so I'm gonna grab my timer tool so I can stay on time with everybody. So let me give me a second. And I hear baby crying and yelling in the background.
It's up to
As
you.
as
If it's a little
babies
bit
do.
over- If
It
you
adds
go a
to the
little over
soundscape.
a minute, it's okay. It's okay if you go over.
Okay, sure. So let me just riff. Things I'm kind of passionate about and interested in at the moment. It kind of goes deep. So for myself, I've been thinking a lot about the patriarchy. I can't help it. I don't mean to center myself around that, but I'm wondering, when does the patriarchy, or when did the patriarchy enter my family? When did it get introduced to my community? When did it get introduced to these territories? Because patriarchy is one of those first forms of colonization that happened across the world, thanks to, in part, the church, the Roman Catholic Church, maybe not them, but the church. And so for me, I understand the lineage of how those things have traveled into where we are here. I've wondered how they've been introduced into, like I said, my own family. And I can come up to it being introduced, at least politically, via policy, through the Indian Act in 1876, which is 3 years before my First Nation signed the amendment to the adhesion to Treaty 6. So officially, before I even had a First Nations community to call home, the patriarchy was introduced into my community. So I want to know, what then was the cause of the breakdown of the matriarchy within the Nahio people? When did that happen? Why did that happen? Not necessarily for the 1, 2, 3 ABC, but to understand the function of how that happened. For myself, I came up in the sciences. I have a very scientific brain. I like thinking of things from A, B, and C based on a hypothesis and a method. So how do I figure this out? Family trees, figuring things out, looking at my own family, understanding my own behavior, understanding codependence, understanding healthy relationships, the cycle of violence, etc. Because it all stems into all these forms into my life, even right down to energy. And I can always pull it back to my physics understanding about energy. And so all these different things are related. No matter what I do, I became to understand the world as intersecting issues just as much as intersecting connections. And as human beings, it's all connected. And why I want to figure that out is to help the land, because it's the humans that is the biggest plague here. And so that's my story and why I'm passionate about all these different things. Thanks.
I gave you my video, yes, Tatenda?
Yes, you did.
So
Okay, yep, I'm gonna start sharing it now.
I have often walked down this street before, but the pavement always stayed beneath my feet before. All at once am I several stories high, knowing I'm on the street where you live. Are there lilac trees in the heart of town? Can you hear a lark in any other part of town? Does enchantment pour out of every door? No, it's just on the street where you live. People stop and stare, they don't bother me, for there's nowhere else on earth that I would rather be. Let the time go by, I won't There were bells on the hill, but I never heard them ringing. No, I never heard them at all till there was you. Bright, sunshiny day. Best wishes.
Thanks to Janelle and Grums for, I started writing down quick notes, and I have bathrooms, patriarchy, science. I love that I wrote that down. To all of you in the room with us, you know, when we talked about doing a quick little video instead of like reading a piece of paper from Tatenda to introduce us, or locating, which someone mentioned in the chat. I've never thought about locating. Here's one version, and if any of you two, Grums and Janelle, have any versions of why to locate, for me, it's because I really have a hard time with labels and the identity markers. Like when you meet someone, they're like, "What do you do for a living?" And and it's always based on that. And I don't know. It's just such a, I guess that's the anti-capitalist in me that just goes, I don't want to tell you what I do for a living. I mean, I live and I love people. And then so to make these videos, you know, I was going to make a video, a new one. And then I came across that and I went, yeah, sometimes words just fail me and I'd rather just play a song. And I want to say out loud, like, that's my neighborhood heritage. And I think the question about what are we passionate about, like, or curious about, like Janelle mentioned when she was sharing, I'm passionate about my neighborhood because it's a mixed bag downtown of lots of different kinds of folks, lots of brown folks, lots of old folks, kids, and it's not a suburb, and it's messy, and it's beautiful to me, and I'm fiercely protective of it because it's often overlooked when it comes to cleaning the streets or the back alleys or taking care of slumlords, you know. So that's what I'm passionate about, is like getting back to being really aware of who my neighbors are, which I grew up in a time in the 70s and 80s when that was a really big deal, like know your neighbors. And I feel like that's less and less in some places, in some neighborhoods. Yeah, okay. My friends, Grums, Janelle, I feel lonely out here. Unmute with me, would you?
I know, it's that thing of like talking into, you tell a joke and the silence.
But everyone's so warm on here, by the way. Thank you. Faces, but also just reactions through chat. Thank you. I think it's wonderful. Anything you want to speak to about what you were sharing about anymore, or locating? What's important to you about locating? Self-locating.
I really like to, like, when I'm running a rehearsal room, I like to start, and when I'm in a rehearsal room as not the person running it, I really like to start with a check-in, and I find that locating also kind of gets that in, where it's just like, it's a time for everybody to just kind of say where they're coming from today, or locate, like share as much or as little as they want, and rather than just assuming everybody's on the same, energy level and stuff as you are.
Yeah, well, for me, I can't turn off my brain from this. I mean, when you learn about something, you can't unsee it sometimes. So for me, I like social location in terms of like being aware of the barriers and privileges that we all have, and knowing that they're not morally good or bad in being in any of those things. Like I mentioned, poorness, like I'm not inherently bad because I am broke. It's just the systems and things that have happened to make the situation the way it is. I'm not afraid about talking about that with class. So also, just like Chris, being authentically yourself at all times is going to both satisfy your spirit, but also give that space to other people and make it more normal. Because those things are more as important. And I talk about intersectionality, and I will be at Generating Momentum later this week. And within that, we'll get to know what are the kinds of structures that exist within societies. They exist And again, doesn't make it morally good or bad, they do. So in understanding that, we can see what kind of equity we have in the space. And for me, overcoming oppression means that there's equitable outcomes based on equitable actions. So social location is one of those easy things that you can do to see who's in the room based on authenticity and these awareness of structures and how comfortable you are. So I really like that in more or less words. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting, eh? Like, in terms of how people in the last decade talking about moving forward, healing, making better relationships. I stay away from the R word, conciliation. But you know, like, and someone just said it to me the other day. I feel like it was Cook and Brenda, but it's just that idea, like we aren't holding the truth long enough before we do the healing or the conciliation, right? And I find that with self-location or locating, it's a practice that takes a while, you know, like it's not, I don't know, I don't feel like it's comfortable right away. And someone in the chat mentioned, thank you for the vulnerability. It's true. It's hard to be vulnerable to say, like right now, just before coming on Zoom with you, I was so, my heart's so raw open. And I think it's being with the senior citizens because they're just so open to me, and we were dancing, you know, and then you, I don't know, and then I glance at the news or glance at the social media news, and the balance of it is tricky. So the locating is a grounding thing for me too, you know. Yeah. And I like, Grams, what you said about the room, like a rehearsal room, kind of takes away or dispels the hierarchy a little bit too, right? When it's not about I'm the director, that's where I'm coming from. It's just I'm coming from, yeah, I've had a bad night of sleep, or like I like those check-ins too.
It's a reminder that we're human beings first and workers hopefully somewhere down the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a couple of questions, if I can butt in for 2 seconds. Okay, so Chris, you mentioned the R word, conciliation. I want to know more, I guess, your struggles behind that word, or why you called it the R word. And then my second question is, can you go a little more into, I guess, the why behind the video that we all just saw? And then the third one is for Grums. I'm just curious about your rant. Can you go a little more into your rant video? Yeah, if you could just, maybe expand on it a little bit. And I think those are my 3 questions.
Nice. Thank you, Tatenda. A good brown friend of mine a while ago was the one who enlightened me or gave me that notion of like, how is it reconciliation when we haven't started it? Or like, why is it sounds like it's redoing it. Yeah, I'm fascinated by words and sometimes get hung up on them and sometimes let go of them. Sometimes I'm like, fuck them, I don't care. And sometimes I'm like, no, they're really important. So I balance that all the time. I think the clown in me as an artist, a theater artist, wants to always make fun of political correctness. And then the caregiver in me wants to hold it and hug it. And so a friend of mine was like, it's not reconciliation because we're not redoing it. It's just starting. So I often will say conciliation or just healing or like making better relationships, because that's just where I'm coming from. The video. With the video. That was shot in early pandemic, like early, like 2 months after we started being in isolation. And I was in the middle of a programming. That's another part of the passionate, ranty curiousness I have right now. I was in the middle of programming that was supposed to be a gathering of lots of people, and we couldn't, of course. And I started thinking about what do I need right now? What does my neighborhood need right now? And during, the early pandemic, when it was like we were all locked up, we were all isolated. I was like, it's so lonely at dusk. It felt lonelier at dusk when people usually are out, or I'm out walking around and like saying hi and get coffee or whatever. And so I was like, what if we do this thing called Nice Dream Truck, like ice cream truck? And we go around the streets and we blast music that we've recorded. Me and Zoe, actually, Zoe, who's in the room, we recorded the songs. And then we dress up in costumes, and Misty and her husband, Orion and Laszlo, their son, joined our family because, at that time you had to be in your pods. So our two families did this parade, not a parade, in May of 2020 to just like let our neighbors know we're out there too, and we're just as lonely, but art matters. It helps, it soothes. And we saw so many of our neighbors and all those little brown kids who came running up to watch us. That's why I wanted to share it, because it feels like forever ago, doesn't it? The beginning of this.
Forever ago, and not at all. Like no time has passed at the same time.
Yeah. So it's curious to me. That's why I wanted to share it. Yeah. Grums, what do you got to say about that rant in the car?
I struggled with like what I wanted to rant about, because there's a lot of stuff in the news that really, really gets me going. But I wanted to bring it back to something smaller that I was experiencing every time I went into a gas station here in the southern United States, and that I experience in lots of places, especially now that I present more queer. And it's something that definitely wasn't. I remember shaving my head for the first time and going, now people perceive me as very queer, and how that felt and how that was different. In the way of like, as a white person, I haven't had to, have people stare at me constantly my whole life. So when I say it's not about bathrooms, but it's always about bathrooms, I feel like there's this great meme of like pie charts of what people think trans issues are, and it's like whole pie chart. What people think it is that whole pie chart is bathrooms, and what the actual issues are, and it's like very much divided into like access to healthcare. Bathrooms are like a tiny little part of it. But at the same time, it's such a symbol for what, like, safety in general and being perceived, and that safety of how I am perceived, and if somebody thinks that I'm going into the wrong bathroom, especially now that I'm definitely more visibly queer, and that discomfort is definitely something I was thinking about, especially when I put a mask on and go in, like, this could be anything. So, yeah, being here and being on the road on Monday was definitely that was kind of in the front of my mind.
Yeah. It's I really feel connected to you, Grams, from you sharing that, because when I think about driving around, like going to the States actually with my family, because we had family in California, so we'd go on road trips all the time. Or when I drive in rural Saskatchewan, actually, and there's that brown hypersensitivity I have about, like, when we used to go down to the States and we'd be in Wyoming in some small town, and it literally would feel like, if the record was playing, the needle got ripped off the record when we'd walk into a small town restaurant, and all the people would look to see who's this brown family coming in from Saskatchewan. And I felt it, like like in Saskatchewan, when there was one moment when we were driving, and my husband and I, and he's white, and we were really lost. And so we pulled up to a farmer's driveway, and I got really uncomfortable. I was just like, I can't go out there. I present too brown right now. That's how I feel right now. You go up and ask for help.
That's real.
So yeah, I can connect to you on that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. We're coming up to, it's the 5th year after Colton Douchy situation. I'm even framing that wrong. Gerald Stanley situation. Yeah, and it was 5 years this month that the decision was made, and I don't want to take it, too far in that direction of talking about those things, but that's very real. I mean, the fear and the awareness to be other, it's its own microaggression in and of itself. That doesn't make anyone feel welcome. To be a view in the gallery. Yeah. Yeah. But what good came from it? That's the territory I live in right now. I'm trying to think of what are constructive ways that we could use this. Well, I know when it comes to anti-oppression, that when you push, there will be resistance from dominance. And so that pushback is an indicator that we're making progress. So I take it that way as well. Like the pro of this Freedom Convoy, it's now proof that what kind of structures the policing services offer and to who and how. And I think it's a very real discussion to continuously have and be aware of those things. Yeah, and these days and age, I'm thankful for social media and these spaces, even though I really missed live, because it's finally, and I said this earlier, we finally have access to these different spaces. And as this prairie-based person, to say these things out loud, it's not so scary. It's not so scary. It's not so I'm trying to, like, although these are very real things, there are also some constructive things that we can pull from these hard situations. But also I want to put the weight in there that the discomfort is also important for us to be working through. But I don't know. I feel like I'm pulling this conversation in a way that I don't want to keep going. That
it's real.
Unless you'd like to. Yeah. And so this month, during Black History Month, Indigenous Storytelling Month, what else things are happening? Chinese Lunar New Year happened earlier this month as well. There's this really great crux of times that are happening right now. So I think having conversations like these and these social locations kind of show us how we're related. And we had that conversation. How are we related? I think, just to put it simply, like, we're from the same area. That's one place we're related. Would you all like to maybe pull in some ideas or thoughts and how you see us related as well?
Yeah. Yes. I'm going to bring up the car ride into a small town. That's how I'm related to the two of you. That feeling. I mean, as soon as I started sharing it, my gut started to tighten. My throat felt tighter. I'm starting to remind myself of the physiological responses when I speak about emotional things, which I want to give a shout out to Resmond Menachem. He's I don't know a writer in the United States that I've came across by accident on a podcast, Resmond Menachem, and he talks a lot about that how the body reacts, right? How our backs tighten up when we're talking as people of color or people who are othered. So yeah, I feel related.
My legs are tight. My thighs get tight. This part, because of the Zoom, I stay loose, but my legs are like, And then they're also like this, like shaking as well. And then if it's bad, my calves are also shaking. And then your palms get sweaty, and it depends. There's a scale. But I feel it below here.
Yeah, I get super sweaty, like hot flashes. And then it's also this feeling of like I'm a hedgehog and all of the bristles on my back go they just like bristle up. We're ready to fight.
Yeah. I actually want to offer maybe some of our photos.
Mm.
Were you able to share some photos? Maybe some of those will help us relate, and not just us three, even to Zoe, to Tenda, Nadima, Megan, Helen, Augustine, and to Daryl and Jasmine. Just making sure I include you all, and Jay. It's just whoever feels they can express or share that. We've offered some images. Tenda's going to share some about our relationship to either land or service. Again, wide sharing.
Oh, these are mine.
Ooh, look at that.
Do you want me to speak to them?
Please.
Can you describe why there's a bunch of skin on one of them? Yeah, and jump in, anybody, if you connect with any of this or put a little emoji up or something. So my photo, to sort of my connection to land and place. So I'm in the Southwest, and it's very unfamiliar terrain. It's very alien to me. But walking around here and seeing little patches of snow, I feel so like, yeah, it's winter, there's snow. And I've lived in a lot of different places that didn't have snow. And every time I go back to snow, I feel so at home. Because I grew up in that very, very cold prairie winter. And I really like these cactuses. I really connect to them because I see their resilience in the snow. They're also a plant that doesn't have very deep root systems, and I think of that with myself and the amount I've had to like move around and travel a lot. And it reminds me of like visiting my grandparents as a kid, because they lived in Arizona. And I'm very much of the prairie ilk where the second there is a steep incline, I'm like, I gotta climb it. I want to be on it. We gotta clamber up it. I just love that about places with mountains and places with hills. Even though I am from the flattest place on earth, I definitely enjoy a good hike, a good incline. My other photo is my relationship to service. So I am sort of in this weird place, weird moment and shift in my role in my community, in my pod, where I'm no longer the youngest person in the room. I and now I have experience and knowledge that I can actually offer. I can't get away with just being the like, I don't know, I'm just starting. I actually have responsibility now. I have a certain amount of like, so I'm finding this stepping into leadership or stepping into experience it's very awkward. I'm still finding my feet, and I relate it to similar to when I was a teenager and I grew really fast and I had all these growing pains and stretch marks. Is kind of how I'm feeling about where I'm at sort of in my quote unquote career, or where I'm at in my community and my art. Because I do have a responsibility to those in the room to set the tone now. I've been in the room for some time, and I have the relationships with other people in the room. And so I have a responsibility to take care of those who are just coming into the room. Yeah, that's me. That's where I'm at.
Okay. uh, these are a few of my favorite things. Starting from the bottom, the very bottom photo is food, potlucking. I have such a relationship to the so many different versions, threads of memories of why food has affected and infected and been part of my art practice, but also just how I get to know people. I feel like there's something, there's that thing about laughing and crying hard and arguing hard and then eating hot bread that I just freaking love with people. I just feel like it's such a communion in that kindest and most respectful way of the world, of communion, the word. And so that was one of the last golden potlucks I did before the pandemic. That's why I wanted to share it. Also because it's so many of my neighbors, again, in heritage area, all bringing different kinds of food. And then to the left of that is, and the next two pictures are of just overlooking in, what's it called? I was at Elbow, Saskatchewan, Diefenbaker Lake Diefenbaker, or that little inlet where people put their boats. I was sitting in the restaurant overlooking, and the first photo, the one on the bottom, there's three bodies on that deck. That's my dad with our two daughters, Iris and Zoe, and they're teaching him a TikTok, which is a big part of my relationship to service in my art, is like intergenerational, like not compartmentalizing. When I'm doing theater, put the young kids and the old people away. Only people between the ages of 20 and 50 should be in the theater. Like I like to say, no, there should be a kid running around, and there should be an old person who needs help, someone to take care of, get them tea and food. And that all exists in real life. So why doesn't it in art world? So that's what that intergenerational photo is. And then to the left of that, or going up around the clock, is just another beautiful photo of Elbow and Lake Diefenbaker, because I spent lots of time there writing the show Burnt Sienna, or creating it and dreaming it and healing my heart about how, as an immigrant kid in the 70s and 80s in Regina, and then growing up, I didn't create and make any true friendships with Indigenous friends until I was in my adult years, like in my 30s. And that is messed up. And I say that very humbly, like that's my version of conciliation, where I started this project and went, yeah, right, Chris, like how many actual deep relationships do you have to people who don't look like you, or kind of look like you, but come from a different place? The next picture is community in another way. I'm greedy for the fun. I love good food, and I love to dance and party. And that's a Fata Dance Christmas party with good friends behind me, Misty and Fran, that I love dearly, and Melanie Monique Rose behind us too, and just dancing till you cry, until you laugh again. That's it. Those are my photos.
Okay, so we are looking at my photos. I quickly sent them to Tatenda today, so let me see what I saw. So for the land, it's the photo on the right. You see me in the fall, beginning of September. I have a open package of loose tobacco. And for those folks who are not familiar with Indigenous culture or protocol in this territory, the gifting of tobacco, raw tobacco as a plant, not the carcinogenic things you find in smoking packages, but it could be. It's often used, pulling it back. The tobacco came from South America, and I forget which country, I think it was Colombia that it came up from. And you can actually trace how the tobacco plant came to the north, to our territory. And so because of the travel and where it came from and its purpose, that protocol also traveled to this territory. So this medicine is both traditional in the way that I use it, but traditional in like beyond colonization in this territory. But what does that have to do with land? With the uncoverings of residential schools and finding children's bodies, I went to one of these spaces where my grandfather went to. And I found out my grandmother, my Nokom, also went to one, but a different one. And I wanted to write about relationship to my relatives. And part of that is paying respects to those who have come before me. so that those who have yet to come will also have that story included. And as a storyteller, it's important for me to follow these practices and protocols, learning as I go, because I will have to carry these things. It's both privilege and responsibility, and that's a whole other unpacking. So what I was doing in this photo was offering tobacco to do a project, to ask for the best intentions and to tell the story that needs to be told in this moment. Please let this go the way it needs to. And, you know, TBH, there's a lot of tears, you know, it's a very humble ask. And it was a very touching moment to be in that space, because that connection to that place in a town where they put the remains of whatever was left of that school in a rubble pile where they keep their compost. And that's a whole other part of this art project that I found very important to tell. All of this practice, is this protocol, is spirituality, is all entangled, not entangled in a bad way. It's enmeshed with who I am and where I come from. So my connection to art and land, ceremony, myself, is that image right there. And to the left of it, in that black and white, is my act of service. And very true to my Leo moon, right? Leo moon nature, I like performance. I like being able to use my voice. I like, now that I have a story and a passion and again, like privilege and responsibility to share these stories, I try to use my voice in good ways. And it's, if you can tell already, I think very maybe out of the box or not conformist, I don't know, whatever people have ideas, but I have this unique position to tell the story. And what you're seeing in this image right now is me at Nuit Blanche last fall, talking about gentrification of Riversdale and how that is just another facet, another turn of the wheel of the century of how gentrification is a removal of the people from the land and how that's happening here in Saskatchewan. So my practice is really deep in that way, even though it comes out as simple as poetry. So my act of service is using myself, and we can go deep into like how you have to be ready to almost put yourself on the line because you're an artist, your name, your face, your art is out there. And so it's like this different kind of offering that I give people. So that's both my acts of service to people, but to myself and my nation. And I feel very blessed to be able to do that. And so if I want to like maybe connect to those things that how I feel related to you, Grums, I can resonate with the hill idea. Like there's not many where I'm from, but like real like either undulating or like dang valleys. I live in a valley, and so I had to run up the hill and down it as well. So I can resonate with hill climbing, but also sliding down those big hills. And also I resonate with this service and how growth feels awkward. I feel like the least adultiest adults in some spaces, you know. I don't know if anyone resonates, but I'm always learning, so it's awkward. And so I've become more comfortable in the awkwardness. And so I can resonate with like, it feels awkward when I'm in these new spaces, but it's my brain. We're all growing and growing into ourselves. And then Chris, I like how you put like the first acts of service, the gathering, the communion, like we're just, my family, my Big Cree family is like, we get together to eat. Right now they're in the kitchen making us a supper that after we're done here, I'm gonna go eat and maybe celebrate this new family member I'm having in my home. It's both hard and a blessing, but the communion, the gathering around food, there's just something about the love you've put into something and then somebody putting it in them, that memory. That's I love that. And then also the centering of in your land photos, like centering this care for youth and elders. It's an adult supremacy out there. As young people, I'm sure we all know So centering the elders and youth, the most precious of our communities, I resonate with that big time. And if we were able to just hold them as the most precious, as well as, trans and two-spirit people in the center, those with special abilities or other abilities. That's probably the wrong framing, and I apologize if I offend. But if we were to able to put those special people in the middle like you did in your photos, things would change. Knowledge would change. We would have these transferring of knowledges. And the question is, how do you give empathy? How do you give these people who are so oppressive empathy? I don't know, man. Maybe their world is over. Maybe it's time to recenter the youth and the elders. So thank you for sharing your photos. And I feel, closer to you because I know how we're related. Thank you.
Woo, thank you, Janelle. Thank you, girl. I feel very much more connected to both of you, and I hope the rest of you in the room, I feel connected to you because you're here witnessing, which is I always remind people how important that is to witness, because you have something with you in your pocket now that you can share, or you can let nurture you. So however you want to take that. The elders and the young. It's why I say yes to Tatendo when I'm too busy and she says, can you be part of Genmo? Because I don't know, more than ever now, right? In this pandemic, the young, I have two teenage daughters, 17 and 14, who are trying to be happy. And there are all the other layers beyond pandemic of like what young girls of color walking on the streets in downtown Regina. There's all these learning things I'm going through that are really humbling. And as with my privilege, I feel, I think I often use the word obligation, but I have an obligation to serve. So thank you two. Tatenda and Grums and Janelle, I'm thinking we sent those questions and we've been sharing lots. It'd be really great if you could share, Tatenda, the questions that we've given, or one of them, or two, whatever, to the group. The questions that we've offered to the group. Because I would love to hear. I see these great faces, and I know people are here listening, but I'd love to hear what. Do you have any of those questions handy, Tatenda, that you could share one of them out loud and see if our room here wants to share back?
Here we go. So the first question is, how do you get someone to come over to your side or to see your point of view about a social issue? And I can put that in the chat as well.
That's a good one. So we can answer on the chat, or you can answer out loud. Please feel free to do that.
Feel free to unmute yourself. You don't need to raise your hand. Yeah.
I was about to say with food. But I think more so it's not something that can happen in one conversation. It definitely takes time. I've been really fortunate to be on both sides of that, to be able to explain something that I felt really passionate about to someone who didn't understand. And eventually, probably after months of conversation, we kind of have like a breakthrough conversation where I mentioned an experience that this person had, and they're like, "Oh, so that's what it feels like." It's like, yes,
now you understand. Like, I wasn't trying to, create stress. I was just trying to help you understand why, situations happen. So it's a process. It's a long process. And I think when you go in with the intention that you want to share something, to open up someone else's mind and heart, and not to sort of win an argument, in a sense. When you go in with good intentions, I feel like that kind of helps the process a lot.
Thanks, Nadima. That was lovely. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, I want to say something. I want to bring something up. So I was gifted a project a while ago from Commonweal Community Arts, a bridging project, they called it, right? Respond to racism, against racism, respond to racism, in my neighborhood. And I was trying to okay, I'm going to put together something and have it here at this space that I'm comfortable with and invite people to come join me. And then I was humbled big time to realize, or to remember, that when you build a bridge, people need to want to walk over. If they have no need to go to the other side. So I bring this up, which is maybe it's a departure from the true essence of this question. I'm not sure, but I wonder, do you find that, all of you trying to make community? I realized, okay, if I want this group of people to join a workshop I'm doing, I need to go visit where they have coffee first. I need to go to where they are and set up some food and have a conversation. And that's what I did in order to then have them buy into, yeah, now you can cross the bridge because you know my face and you know what I'm about. And I don't know, does that make sense?
I could respond as well. And this is also one of those things where it's both like a structural analysis and a personal, mental health analysis. So I want to think about power in this situation. We are not above anyone else, and there's no way we have any right to change anyone's mind, but we can. So if we're going to approach these, and our first lovely speaker who responded to this question said it well, it's like going into those spaces, as well as with Chris, with food and offering to hear back from them. It's a reciprocation of how this can happen. But you have to go in knowing that you can only make friends, build relationships, not win arguments, because but then I think about equity in personal and also in structural. And so it's both our boundaries to ourselves, to honor ourselves, to know that we're good and secure without having to change anyone else's mind. And that takes a lot of work to get to, a lot of humbling, because myself, I went into this work trying to make change and change the world. And I did, because I changed myself. And that's how the microcosm of change happens in ourselves. It's in here, which will go out into the world. Yeah. Thanks for giving me space to say that. That was pretty deep.
It was super deep. I'm learning so much from this whole day.
Yeah, that was really deep. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Truly.
I have a lot of information to take back to the team. I'm hoping I can remember this by tomorrow morning. So Janelle's question in the dark is, how can we bring children into social movements? I'll put that in the chat.
Maybe I
I-
can, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, please. I've listened passionately to all the talks, and I think I'm actually having a ball. I'm enjoying my evening with everybody here. I am relatively new in Canada. I have witnessed some of the social challenges that are maybe propping up in Canada. In my home country, Nigeria, I came in from Nigeria a few years ago. My family, I have 2 adult children who are getting married this year, both of them. So I have battled with that question of getting the children to understand certain basic fundamentals of social engagement. And back to the first question, one of those first questions of reconciliation, making people to see your side and getting you to understand some of the things that you believe in, your values, things you believe in, things you think are good, those things that can create some harmony, unity, coexistence, and build a society where everyone feels safe in their identities. And back home, I've practiced journalism for 34 years running before coming to this place. And I was looking at the society, the shape of the society here. I can tell you it's quite different. We are very, very cultural people back in Nigeria. We are very connected. We find it difficult to live in isolation. So we are naturally tied around each other. When I came here, people are distracted. I mean, they tend to live by themselves and everybody on their own. So it's a very, very difficult environment for me. So you want to look at the issues of racism, for instance, issues of discrimination, issues of hate that is gradually, would I say, crossing the border from the US down to this side of where the good thing about Canada is that we are not holding the guns in our hands. So to a large extent, we can talk to ourselves and begin to look at the need for coexistence. So sometimes last year, I set up Primark Foundation to concentrate on racism, hate, and discrimination. How do we build a society that everyone will feel safe in their identities? And the question of the children come in here. So you want to look at how do we get our children right from the time they are formative ages to go beyond the bridges of color, go beyond the bridges of religion, go beyond the bridges of culture, where the Blacks, the Asians, the whites, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody feel fine and good. And if you ask me, it's a matter of building confidence, building bridges of trust. If we do not do that in our children right from the beginning, we have a problem, because they will grow with the tendencies they have grown up with, what we tell them at home, how we react to issues. Maybe we are watching television, the way we react to issues we see and how the children see us react to them. They get up with those tendencies, and before you know, before they are adults, they have these ideas that they are different from other people. So government policies, what we teach in our curriculum, in schools, how the parenting duties, how we deliberately make it possible for children to see everyone as the same. They're all important in getting the children to understand that the society is not complete without the other person. You cannot live in isolation. You cannot build yourself up and live all alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I would love to say, I know for myself, the one small revolution I tried to do while the kids were growing up in our house and we were homeschooling actually. One thing I really wanted to do was every time we went out to events, I took my kids. Every time we went to coffee shops when I wanted to do some work, I would pack up their backpack with their crayons and their books, and I'd say, "We're going to the cafe. This is cafe time," and modeling what was normal, which is like we all sit in the cafe and write and read and debate and have coffee and have tea or have, and same with dance events, arts events. I brought them everywhere, when I could, when I could, and when I worked in Globe Theater, like teaching theater classes ages like 3 up to 16, I remember really challenging myself with like doing away with a conservative institutionalized way of teaching and going, remember that they're your teachers, Chris. They can teach you so much if you just listen. If you stop worrying about this project needs to be done, and just listen to them, like actually ask them questions, prompt them to have a discussion about anything, a perspective on grown-ups. I remember doing a project on grown-ups with a theater class of ages 9 and 10 and asking them to just imagine you're a grown-up. Show me what that looks like. What does that look like? How do you walk? And each and every one of them started walking with a coffee like this. They mimed it, and their phones. And they all walked and they walked, like 12 kids in a class. And I asked them to take 20 minutes and create a scene of what do grown-ups do in the day. So I just kept asking, like, what do grown-ups do? What do they talk about? And they created these scenes, and these scenes of offices, like they did it. They modeled of like talking about coffee, traffic, money. And so it became really loud to me that, oh, right, children, like what you just said, Augustine, children are listening and they're watching so keenly how we model, right? And so that was one thing that it came to my mind with this question. And also like when I work in making creative projects, and I mentioned it in the pictures, when I create certain events, most events that I do, I demand that any age can come in the door. It's not, and I say that, and I also go, but, if you have a 3-year-old and you're going to a 2-hour lecture at the university, maybe that's not the event. Maybe it's not, if you don't have to, because that's not, it's not fun for them, for the 3-year-old is what I think. But yeah, like to these different community things, I think that's another part of this capitalist, white supremacist biased world where we compartmentalize art, living. We have a room in the house called the living room. What does that mean? Anyways, my mind's bubbling with many things, but I'll stop there because I want to. I'm mindful of time. 7:57. Ooh. That went. What do you think, Tatenda? Do we have time for another question, or shall we wrap it from there? Oh,
Thanks, Helen.
yeah.
I don't know. It's up to you. I also want to be mindful of people's evenings and Zoom fatigue and long days.
Yeah.
So it's totally up to you. Again, there's no structure.
I think this, this is lovely, Janelle and Grums. And if people want to discuss more, they should join our panels, our workshops on the weekend.
Yes, thank you for everyone offered tonight. It was so lovely to hear other folks' thoughts and experiences and understandings. And it's been my intention this last year to listen. And so listening to other people rather than to speak. That's a cultural norm here in Canada. Sometimes people only listen to speak. To sit and process has been an awakening of both my heart and my patience. It's shifted me. So I appreciate all that everyone offered, and also the vulnerable space you've given us as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I also resonate with that, where I'm like, okay, shut up, Grummy. Like, let other people be conscious of like listening, and having a mute button on Zoom is a big, big help for me. But thank you all. I think when we had our little pre-meeting for this, something we talked about, our objective for this was and our intention was focused on relationship. And so I feel so much more connected to the two of you. Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope that those of you here, those of you that spoke, I feel so much more connected to you. And those of you that didn't, I hope to get to know you more at the workshops. But I also hope that you know a little bit more about us and feel more comfortable in the workshops to ask questions or bring your whole selves into it. Yeah, thank you for being here and letting me talk about cactuses and stuff.
Thanks to Tenda for creating a space for us to, and for trusting us. I will always say this about Tatenda Maka, who works for SCIC, and I'm so happy she lives in Regina. I hope she stays a bit longer. We'll see. But she really puts a lot of trust in the artists and activists in organizing and creating space. And I've always appreciated, I cherish that actually, Tatenda. It's not the norm in all the rooms. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris, for such kind words. Yeah, I think connecting with you was heaven sent when I moved to Regina. So I'm super happy that we're still friends, that we get to work together, and that you brought Grums and Janelle into my network. I'm really excited to work with all three of you this weekend. And to everyone who's in this virtual space, thank you for taking the time to join us, to listen, to participate, to be engaged in the chat, and more so to be engaged with SCIC, the Saskatchewan Council for International Cooperation. They make my work possible. More so, you make my work possible by attending these events. So I just put our social media handle in the chat, as well as our website under survey. If you could please fill out that survey, it helps us to kind of, plan our programming. We want to hear what the community needs, how people have engaged with the events that we put on. So please do take the time. And yeah, I just want to thank you for taking the time this evening. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to virtually seeing everybody at our next event sometime soon. And yes, stay safe. Take care of yourselves and have a good evening.
Good night.